hands. Everyone wants to stand, I roll in my jack. Fast like the wind, everybody's on the boardroom. To the streets, I'm the man with the plan. Got the world in my hands, every woman wants to stand. I roll in my jag, fast like the wind. Every mission I take, you know I'm gonna win. Ladies on my left, danger on the right. But it's love and respect that I'm bringing to the fight.
On the path with the 9 lives, playing the game. A heart full of fire, can't be tamed. In the shadows I roam, but I shine so bright. With every step I take, I'm doing it right.
Welcome to the world of J-Cat Adventures. Jay Bahari is the creative mind behind J-Cat, a dark, handsome, and irresistibly charming playboy who knows his way around the world's most elite circles. He's a man of adventure, romance, and intrigue, living a life most could only dream of. Beneath the tailored suits, fast cars, and high society allure lies a purpose that drives him to protect the vulnerable and bring justice to those without a voice. Dive into the captivating magic of J-Cat Adventures and discover ebooks, print editions, and audiobooks tailored for those who crave romance, suspense, and a touch of classic drama. Through each episode, you'll experience heart-stopping escapades, luxurious settings, and captivating romances that whisk you to distant lands, all woven into J-Cat's thrilling life. So, subscribe, tune in, and join our community of fans who share your love for stories that blend elegance with danger and heroism with passion. Whether you're a wanderlust soul, a romantic at heart, or just love a great adventure, J-Cat Adventures is here to awaken your spirit for excitement, justice, and unrelenting romance.
Full of fire, can't be tamed. In the shadows I roam, but I shine so bright. With every step I take, I'm doing it right.
Hi, I am Gregory, the AI, and narrator for Jay Bahari. Let's go. J-Cat, the shadows embrace. The city lights shimmered like 1,000 diamonds strewn across the velvet sky, each flicker a testament to the lives that pulsed beneath its glossy surface. In the heart of this dazzling metropolis, one name echoed through the circles of power, whispered in awe and spoken in hushed tones, J-Cat. The name alone was enough to make even the most composed individuals quiver with anticipation, for J-Cat was a man who embodied more than just physical allure. He was the perfect enigma, a creature of darkness and light, of charm and danger. His name carried with it the promise of mystery and passion, of danger and deliverance. He was a living legend, dark-haired, with eyes that seemed to pierce the soul. His gaze was magnetic, promising 1,000 unspoken promises, 1,000 adventures yet to be explored. No one could ever quite decipher the depth of those eyes. Was it the sparkle of a lover's gaze, or the cold gleam of someone who had seen too much of the world's hidden underbelly? The mystery only made him more irresistible. As he strode through the streets of the city, the air seemed to thrum with a kind of magnetic energy, the very space around him charged with his presence. Draped in an impeccably tailored black suit that clung to his broad shoulders and tapered waist, J-Cat moved like a predator in the night, sleek and powerful. His every step was an invitation, each movement an exquisite display of confidence and precision. A whisper of a smile tugged at the corner of his lips, a smile that suggested secrets known only to him, promises made in the shadows. He wasn't just a playboy, he was a man who had mastered the art of allure, of bending others to his will without ever seeming to try. But beneath the irresistible exterior of luxury, wealth, and seductive charm, J-Cat was something more. He was a protector. He had earned his reputation in the darkest corners of society, where his name was spoken with a mixture of fear and reverence. The underworld knew him as a force that struck swiftly and without mercy against those who preyed on the innocent. Yet even in the brutal world he navigated, he never lost his sense of justice. The first time she saw him, Padi could hardly breathe. She had heard rumors, of course, the stories about J-Cat were legend. But nothing could have prepared her for the man who stood before her now. She was in the most exclusive restaurant in the city, the kind of place where only the rich and powerful dined, and the air felt thick with secrets and wealth. As she sat at a corner table, surveying the room, a wave of electricity passed through her as J-Cat walked in. He was like nothing she had ever seen before, tall, dark, and devastatingly handsome, with a presence that immediately commanded attention. The room seemed to pause in respect, every person turning their head, drawn to him like moths to a flame. J-Cat was a man who was used to being the center of attention, and he enjoyed it. But it was something more that held his gaze, something deeper. When his eyes locked with hers, a jolt of recognition passed between them, like two stars colliding in the night sky. It was magnetic, a force neither of them could resist. He approached her table with effortless grace, each step measured, as if he had rehearsed the choreography of the room itself. His gaze never left hers as he spoke in a low, smooth voice. "Padi, isn't it?" he said, his lips curling into a smile that was equal parts invitation and challenge. "I'm afraid you've caught my attention." Her heart raced, her breath hitching in her throat. How did he know her name? "I've been told that your beauty is only rivaled by your intelligence," he continued, his tone playful yet earnest, as though he genuinely wanted to know more. "But beauty alone isn't enough to captivate a man like me. I require something deeper." Padi swallowed, her mind spinning. He was a puzzle she wanted to solve, yet she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. "And what might that be?" she asked, her voice steady, though inside, her pulse hammered like a drum. "Strength," he said simply, leaning in just enough for her to catch the subtle notes of a mystery laced in his words. "The kind of strength that comes from within. The kind that makes you stand out in a room full of people who have everything." Padi smiled softly, intrigued. "And what do you do with that strength?" she asked, her voice laced with curiosity. He took a moment before answering, his eyes darkening slightly as though the question had triggered something deeper within him. "I use it to protect those who cannot protect themselves," he said, his voice low, but with an edge of something fierce and dangerous. "I fight the battles no one sees. And sometimes," he paused, his gaze piercing, "I make sure that justice is served in ways that are far from conventional." She leaned forward, caught by his intensity, intrigued by the promise in his words. "That sounds dangerous." He gave a small smile, the corners of his lips curling with a sort of knowing confidence that came from a man who had lived through more danger than most could fathom. "It is. But danger is what makes life worth living, don't you think?" Before she could respond, their moment was interrupted by a man at the next table, a well-dressed, arrogant type who clearly thought he could take over the conversation. J-Cat's gaze flicked briefly to the man, and just that shift in attention was enough to make the interloper pause, suddenly unsure of his position. J-Cat's eyes returned to Padi, and with a barely perceptible movement, he dismissed the other man without a word. It was the kind of power that didn't require force, it was all about presence. As the night wore on, J-Cat and Padi spoke for hours, the conversation flowing as effortlessly as the wine in their glasses. He captivated her with his stories of intrigue, of missions that took him to the farthest corners of the world, of alliances forged in the heat of danger. Every word was a carefully crafted puzzle, and Padi was drawn deeper into the web. But even as their chemistry burned brightly, J-Cat remained a mystery. When the evening ended, he took her hand in his touch sending a shiver up her spine. "I'll see you again, Padi," he said, his voice low and full of promise. "And when I do, you'll know exactly who I am. But for now, remember this." He leaned close, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered, "Some shadows are best left unexplored." With that, he was gone, disappearing into the night like the phantom he was, leaving behind only the haunting echo of his words and the unforgettable impression of a man who was as dangerous as he was irresistible. Padi didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: she was already caught in his shadow, and there was no turning back. The days that followed their chance encounter were nothing short of surreal. Padi found herself haunted by J-Cat's words, his presence lingering in her thoughts like the faintest scent of a forbidden perfume. He had said he would see her again, but Padi couldn't help but wonder if that promise was nothing more than another one of his cryptic, tantalizing gestures. Her life continued as usual, but it was different now. The glow of the city, once familiar and comforting, now felt a little less bright without his shadow looming somewhere in the distance. Everywhere she went, Padi found herself glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see him standing in a dark corner, watching, waiting. But there was no sign of him, just the same faces, the same routines. It was a Tuesday evening when she received the text message that would change everything. The message was short, simple: "I haven't forgotten you. Dinner tomorrow night. The usual place. 8 p.m. Come alone." Padi's breath caught in her throat as she read it, her fingers hovering over the phone screen. The usual place. It was the restaurant they'd met in, a place where the ultra-wealthy dined, a place where shadows of intrigue mingled with candlelight. She hadn't even realized she'd been waiting for him until that moment. And now, here he was again, pulling her back into his world without a single word of explanation. The next night, Padi arrived early, her anticipation practically vibrating through her veins. She wore a sleek black dress that clung to her curves, her hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. She had carefully chosen every detail, as if preparing for a moment that could shatter the careful order of her life. As she entered the restaurant, a sense of déjà vu washed over her. The ambient glow of the chandeliers, the hushed conversations of the elite, the hum of whispered secrets, it was all the same. But something was different. There was an undeniable energy in the air, an electric charge that told her J-Cat was close. She took a seat at their usual table, near the corner, out of sight but within earshot. The staff were already expecting her, though they said nothing. She was just another beautiful woman in this world of wealth and influence. But for Padi, tonight was more than just another dinner. She could feel it, the pull of destiny, the weight of fate moving through her. At exactly 8 p.m., the doors of the restaurant swung open, and the room seemed to pause. J-Cat had arrived. Dressed in a black suit that looked as though it had been custom-tailored to fit every inch of his chiseled form, he strode into the room with his usual grace, his eyes scanning the space with a quiet intensity. The moment they landed on Padi, she felt the air around her tighten, the rest of the world receding into the background. There he was, the enigma that both terrified and fascinated her. His jet-black hair was slightly tousled, as though he had just risen from the sheets of a lover's bed, and his eyes, those eyes, were dark with a depth that promised both danger and seduction. When he reached her, he didn't sit down immediately. Instead, he paused for a moment, as though savoring the anticipation in the air. "Good evening, Padi," he said, his voice a low, silky rasp that seemed to echo in the space between them. He leaned in close, just enough for her to feel the warmth of his body, the scent of his cologne, cedarwood and leather with an undertone of something wild, something untamed. "You look even more beautiful tonight than you did last time," he added, his lips curving into that devastatingly mysterious smile. "But I imagine that's just the beginning, isn't it?" Her heart skipped a beat at his words, her pulse quickening. She had no idea where this was headed, but she was undeniably drawn to him, pulled like a moth to a flame. "I wasn't expecting you to come back so soon," Padi replied, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "But I'm glad you did." J-Cat sat down opposite her, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've been waiting for the right moment," he said simply. "There are things that must remain in the shadows for now. But you—" he let the word hang in the air. "You deserve to know more." Padi's breath caught. No more? What did that even mean? And why did his words send a shiver of both excitement and fear down her spine? Before she could respond, the waiter arrived, his presence momentarily pulling her attention away. They ordered their drinks, and J-Cat selected a bottle of the finest wine, the kind of rare vintage that wasn't even listed on the menu, yet he seemed to know exactly what he wanted. As the evening unfolded, the conversation shifted from the usual pleasantries to something far more intriguing. J-Cat spoke of the world beyond the glittering facade of wealth and power. He spoke in cryptic terms, hinting at a network of influence that stretched far beyond anything Padi had imagined. She listened intently, her curiosity growing, as he described a world where every move was calculated, every ally was carefully chosen, and every enemy was crushed with ruthless precision. But there was something else, something deeper. "I move through the world differently than most," he said, his gaze intense as he studied her face. "I have power, Padi. Influence. But more than that, I have a responsibility. A duty to protect the vulnerable. To right wrongs that others cannot, or will not, see. Some call me a hero. Others call me a villain. But they all know one thing, I am always in control." His words sent a chill down her spine, but they also intrigued her. J-Cat wasn't just a playboy, a charming man of wealth and decadence. He was something more, a man of shadows, a man whose very existence seemed to blur the lines between right and wrong. "I don't know if I can understand what that life is like," Padi said softly, her voice betraying a hint of awe. "But I do know one thing, you have a way of making everything seem possible." J-Cat's lips curved into a slow smile. "That's because it is, Padi," he replied, his voice low and dangerous. "Anything is possible, if you're willing to pay the price." A silence fell between them, thick with meaning. Padi's heart raced as she realized the depth of the life he was offering her, a life that was both thrilling and terrifying. Without warning, J-Cat stood, his chair scraping softly against the floor. He extended his hand to her, his gaze locking with hers. "Come with me," he said simply. "I'll show you the world I live in." Padi hesitated for a fraction of a second, her mind racing. This was it. This was the moment where she either walked away or stepped into a world from which there would be no return. She knew the danger. She knew the risks. And yet, she couldn't resist. With a breath that felt like the beginning of something monumental, Padi placed her hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, she felt a surge of energy rush through her. It was as if the entire world had shifted, and the path before her had suddenly become clear. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. J-Cat's lips brushed against her ear, his breath warm on her skin. "To the shadows, Padi. To where the real game begins." And with that, they walked out of the restaurant together, into the night, a night that held endless possibilities, a night that would change her life forever. The night was heavy with anticipation, the world outside the sleek black Jaguar blurring as it sped through the quiet streets, its polished body gleaming under the soft moonlight. Padi's heart raced as she sat beside J-Cat, her breath coming faster with each turn of the car's wheels. She hadn't known what to expect when he'd invited her out again, but this felt different. There was a gravity between them now, a pull that had grown stronger since their first meeting. And tonight, the weight of it seemed to fill the car, surrounding them in a silence that was both thrilling and tender. J-Cat's profile was the epitome of masculine grace. His sharp jawline caught the streetlights and flashes, and his dark eyes, despite their intensity, held a warmth that wasn't there before, an almost imperceptible softness when they flicked toward her. "Do you know where we're going?" Padi asked, her voice soft, almost a whisper against the hum of the engine. He glanced at her then, his lips curving into the faintest of smiles. "No, but I think I know where we're headed." "I think you do, too." She tilted her head, not quite understanding, but the words hung in the air like a question they both already knew the answer to. The night between them wasn't just about attraction anymore. It was something deeper, something they hadn't yet spoken out loud, but which both of them could feel, pulsing in the space between their glances and touches. The car slowed as they turned down a quiet, tree-lined street. Padi's curiosity piqued as J-Cat drove through a wrought iron gate, the kind that whispered wealth and secrets. He pulled up to a secluded villa, its stone walls draped in ivy and softened by the glow of lanterns lining the path. "Where are we?" she asked, the intrigue in her voice betraying her calm exterior. J-Cat didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened the door and stepped out, moving with the ease of someone completely at home in this world, this place. When he turned to help Padi from the car, his hands were gentle but firm, his touch as soothing as it was powerful. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and in the quiet stillness of the evening, Padi felt an overwhelming sense of trust, as if everything had led her to this moment. "You're safe here," he said softly, as though sensing her unease. His voice, like the night itself, was both comforting and enigmatic. He guided her up the stone steps toward the villa's grand entrance. The scent of jasmine filled the air, mixing with the cool night breeze. The house seemed to pulse with an intimate, quiet energy, as if it had been waiting for them. As they stepped inside, the soft glow of candlelight illuminated the space, a massive living room, with soft leather chairs, a roaring fireplace, and walls lined with books and art. It was elegant, but not overdone. It felt personal. J-Cat closed the door behind them and turned to her. "This is where I come when I need to think. To escape." Padi glanced around, taking in the warmth of the place, the serenity. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. He walked toward the fireplace, running his hand through his hair as he gazed into the flames. "I've been thinking a lot lately." His voice was distant, but not cold. "About us." Padi stepped closer, unsure of what he meant. "Us?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." He turned to her then, his dark eyes locking onto hers, and for a moment, the whole world seemed to still. "I know what this feels like, Padi. I know what it's like to want something more than just a fleeting connection. What we've shared so far. It's been intense. But it's not just the attraction that keeps pulling me to you." He took a step forward, closing the space between them, and her breath caught. "It's you. It's your strength, your kindness, your ability to see through all the layers I've carefully built around myself. I think." His voice faltered for just a moment before he continued, "I think I've been waiting for someone like you." Her heart fluttered in her chest. J-Cat, the man who had never seemed to care for anything beyond his own desires, was standing here, saying these things to her. Padi had never expected this, had never expected him to reveal so much, to be so honest. She had seen the power in him, the control, the way he moved through the world like a shadow. But this was different. "Padi," he said softly, taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, his fingers gentle as they intertwined with hers. "I don't want to play games anymore. I don't want to hide behind all the walls I've built around myself. Not with you." Her breath caught, her mind racing with the implications of his words. He wasn't just offering her passion. He was offering truth. Vulnerability. The kind of connection that most people spent their lives chasing but never found. Slowly, J-Cat led her toward the large windows that opened out into a garden bathed in moonlight. The soft chirping of crickets filled the air, and the world outside felt so far away from the chaos and noise of their lives. It felt like a sanctuary. He stopped just short of the garden door, his fingers gently lifting her chin so their eyes met once more. "I've been living in the shadows for too long," he said, his voice a hushed reverence. "But when I'm with you, it's like I can finally breathe." Padi's heart ached at his words, a deep longing welling up inside her. She'd always been drawn to him, the darkness in his eyes, the mystery that surrounded him. But now, it was clear. It wasn't just his power that pulled her in. It was the tenderness he was willing to show her, the vulnerability he was offering her, something he had never shown anyone before. "I want to be with you, J-Cat," she whispered, the words leaving her lips before she could stop them. "In every way. I want to see all of you." His gaze softened, and for a moment, Padi saw something in his eyes she had never seen before, peace. "Then let me show you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. He stepped closer, his body nearly brushing against hers. She could feel the warmth of his presence, the steady beat of his heart. His hand cupped her face, tilting her chin so he could kiss her gently, his lips warm and soft against hers. The kiss was slow at first, as though he were savoring the moment, exploring her with a tenderness that made her chest tighten. Padi's hands moved to his chest, feeling the hard lines of muscle beneath his shirt. She slid them up, fingers trembling slightly, until she cupped his face, returning the kiss with the same quiet intensity. Every inch of her was aware of him, of the way he touched her, of the way he made her feel. When the kiss finally broke, J-Cat rested his forehead against hers, his breath coming in short, uneven bursts. "I don't know how this will turn out, Padi," he whispered. "But I know one thing for sure." "What's that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "You make me feel like I'm finally home." A wave of warmth surged through her chest at his words, and before she could respond, J-Cat gently tugged her toward the door leading out into the garden. Under the moonlight, the flowers seemed to bloom brighter, their delicate petals glowing softly against the darkness. J-Cat stopped in the center of the garden, his hands on her waist, pulling her close. He kissed her again, this time with a deeper hunger, a desperation that spoke of all the emotions he'd held inside for so long. This time, it wasn't just passion. It was love. It was trust. It was the unspoken promise that no matter where life took them, no matter how many shadows they had to face, they would always have each other. And in that moment, Padi knew that no matter the path they walked, no matter the dangers or the distance, she would walk it with him. Forever. The garden around them was bathed in the soft light of the moon, casting long shadows that flickered with the gentle movement of the trees in the night breeze. The scent of jasmine and roses filled the air, and the world seemed to slow, to still, just for them. Padi's pulse still raced from the kiss, from the raw connection that had passed between them, but now, in the quiet of the night, everything felt different. It was as though a barrier had fallen, and the person standing in front of her wasn't just the dangerous, elusive J-Cat, the enigmatic playboy. He was something more. Something deeper. Someone who cared. Her hand rested lightly on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart under the fine fabric of his shirt. She could feel his warmth, his strength, but there was something else, something she hadn't noticed before, the tenderness in the way he held her, the vulnerability in his eyes as he gazed at her. It was a side of him she hadn't expected to see. J-Cat's thumb traced the curve of her cheek as he slowly leaned in, his lips brushing against her forehead, a tender kiss that sent a shiver through her. It was different than the heated passion they had shared earlier. This was gentle, careful. It felt like a promise. "I've never let anyone in like this before," he whispered, his voice rough, as though the words were difficult to say. "Not even close." Padi's heart ached at the honesty in his voice. It made everything they had felt so much more significant, so much more meaningful. "I don't want to hurt you," she said softly, her own vulnerability making her voice tremble. "You won't," J-Cat replied, his gaze unwavering. "But I need you to understand something. What we're doing, what we're building, it's not just about me showing you my world. It's about us, together. You and me. This isn't some fleeting moment." Padi swallowed hard, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't realized until now how badly she'd needed to hear those words. She hadn't realized how deeply she wanted him, all of him. Not just the man with the charm and the power, but the man who was standing before her, offering her something real, something raw, something true. I don't want it to be fleeting, she whispered. I want this. I want us. J-Cat smiled, a soft, genuine smile that lit up his face in a way that was almost unrecognizable. The sharp edges of his persona softened, just for a moment, revealing the man underneath. The man who was capable of this kind of tenderness. I'm not perfect, Padi, he said, his hands coming to rest gently on her waist, pulling her closer, his forehead resting against hers. I've spent my life hiding behind walls. Behind shadows. I've learned to push people away. But with you. He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling against hers. With you, it's different. You make me want to be better. Her heart swelled at his words, a tear threatening to form at the corner of her eye, but she blinked it away, not wanting to break the moment. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. You are better, she said softly, her voice filled with conviction. You're more than what the world sees. He shook his head, a small, self-deprecating smile curving his lips. I don't know about that, he murmured. But I'm willing to try. For you. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. She could see the sincerity there, the way he was offering her a part of himself that he had never shown anyone before. He wasn't just the master of control and seduction. He was human, and somehow, that made him even more irresistible. J-Cat's fingers brushed through her hair, tucking a loose strand behind her ear. You've changed everything for me, Padi, he whispered. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this. But I want to try. With you. Padi felt her heart leap in her chest. She stepped closer, her hands on his shoulders, as if grounding herself in the moment. Then let's try together. She whispered. One step at a time. No more running. A flash of something, relief, joy, something deeper, flashed in J-Cat's eyes, and he leaned down to kiss her again, this time softer, slower, the kiss full of promise. It wasn't just a kiss between two people who were lost in attraction, it was a kiss that spoke of shared hope, of vulnerability, of what could be. And with each passing second, Padi felt herself letting go of every hesitation, every doubt. When the kiss broke, they stood there, in the quiet of the garden, not needing to say anything else. The air around them was still, except for the soft rustling of the trees and the gentle chirping of crickets. J-Cat wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close, as if he were afraid to let go, afraid to lose her in this beautiful, fleeting moment. You're not like anyone I've ever met, he murmured, his lips brushing against her temple. And you're not like anyone I've ever known, she replied, her voice soft but steady. But that's what I want. I want to know you. All of you. I want to be part of your world, J-Cat. In whatever way that means. His grip on her tightened slightly, as though he were afraid that if he let go, she might slip away. But Padi didn't plan on leaving. She was already there, standing in his arms, beneath the stars, in a place where time seemed to stand still. Then we take it one day at a time, he said, his voice full of promise. No pressure. No games. Just us. And what comes next? She smiled up at him, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. I can live with that, she said, her fingers trailing up to touch his jaw, feeling the sharp lines of his face. One day at a time. And for the first time in her life, Padi felt like she wasn't just living. She was alive, truly alive, because of him. Because of the man who had shown her the world of shadows, and in doing so, had given her the brightest light she had ever known. J-Cat kissed her forehead again, the gesture tender, loving, and protective all at once. Good, he said, his voice steady, full of conviction. That's all I need to know. As they stood together, wrapped in each other's embrace, the world around them seemed to melt away. It didn't matter that the city beyond the walls was full of noise, full of chaos. Right here, in this garden, with J-Cat holding her close, Padi knew that this was where she belonged. And so, with one final kiss, slow, deep, and full of promise, their future began, one step at a time, under the watchful eyes of the stars. The days after that night in the garden were a blur of warmth and closeness. J-Cat and Padi, now undeniably connected in ways they hadn't expected, found themselves navigating uncharted waters together. There was a quiet intimacy between them that hadn't existed before, a kind of unspoken understanding that only deepened with each passing day. J-Cat's world, once full of fleeting encounters and calculated moves, had shifted. He found himself more and more drawn to Padi, not just for the physical pull that had always existed between them, but for the way she made him feel seen. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was hiding behind a mask or a carefully constructed persona. With her, he was just himself, flawed, imperfect, but real. And Padi, with her quiet strength and unwavering warmth, had become the anchor he never knew he needed. But as the days passed, Padi, too, felt the weight of their connection. The feeling of belonging in a way she had never allowed herself to feel before. She had always kept a certain distance from people, her own defense mechanism, forged over years of seeing the darker side of the world. But with J-Cat, it was different. He had drawn her into his orbit, slowly and steadily, until there was no longer a way to untangle herself from the web they had woven together. It was late one evening when it happened, the moment that would shift everything yet again. They had spent the day together, wrapped in the warmth of each other's company. Padi had found herself laughing at J-Cat's dry wit, his humor dark but somehow comforting in its honesty. They had walked through art galleries, explored hidden corners of the city, and shared intimate dinners where the conversations seemed to flow endlessly, full of everything and nothing at the same time. They were living in their own little world, and for once, neither of them wanted to leave. But now, as they stood on the balcony of J-Cat's penthouse, overlooking the twinkling lights of the city below, a different kind of silence had fallen between them. It wasn't awkward or uncomfortable, but full of a deeper understanding, a moment suspended between two hearts that had come to care for each other in ways they hadn't expected. Padi leaned against the railing, her fingers brushing the cool metal, her eyes lost in the vastness of the skyline. J-Cat stood beside her, a few inches away, his gaze focused on the horizon, but Padi could feel him watching her out of the corner of his eye. "You're quiet tonight," he finally said, his voice low and steady. Padi smiled softly, not looking at him, but feeling the warmth of his presence next to her. "Just thinking," she replied. "About us. About everything." J-Cat's gaze flickered to her, his expression unreadable. "What about us?" She took a deep breath, turning to face him now, her eyes meeting his. "About how much has changed. How much I've changed. Since you came into my life." He raised an eyebrow, the faintest of smiles tugging at his lips. "And how's that?" Padi shook her head, her eyes searching his. "I've never let myself care for anyone like this. Never let anyone in the way I've let you in. But with you, it's different. I don't have to protect myself. I don't have to hide." J-Cat was silent for a moment, his expression softening as he looked at her. Then, slowly, he reached out, gently cupping her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "You don't have to hide with me," he said softly, his voice full of an emotion Padi couldn't quite place. "I'm not going anywhere. Not this time." His words, spoken with such conviction, sent a rush of warmth through her. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel the sincerity in his touch, in his words. She hadn't realized how much she'd needed to hear them until now. When she opened her eyes again, J-Cat's face was inches from hers. There was something in his gaze, a tenderness, that made her chest tighten with emotion. "I need you to know something, Padi," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You're more than just someone I care about. You're everything. I don't know how I got here, or why, but I do know that I don't ever want to let you go. You've brought something into my life I didn't even know I was missing." Padi's breath hitched in her throat. She had never heard J-Cat speak like this before. The man who had always been guarded, who had kept his emotions locked away, was now standing in front of her, bare and vulnerable. "You are everything," she whispered back, her voice trembling. "I never thought I'd find someone like you. I never thought I'd let myself feel this way. But I do, J-Cat. I do." And then, without another word, he kissed her. It was slow, almost reverent, as if each touch of his lips against hers was an unspoken promise, a vow to never let go. It wasn't a kiss fueled by desire alone, it was a kiss that carried the weight of everything they had shared. The laughter, the moments of silence, the tenderness. The way they had both exposed the rawest parts of themselves and allowed the other to see them without judgment. As the kiss deepened, Padi felt the world around her fade. There was no past, no future, there was only this moment, this connection. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, if that was even possible, wanting to feel every inch of him. Her lips parted as his tongue gently brushed against hers, and the heat between them grew, slow but undeniable. But even as their bodies pressed together, the kiss was still filled with that quiet tenderness. The kind of tenderness that wasn't about passion alone, but about trust. about sharing pieces of themselves they hadn't let anyone see before. Finally, they pulled apart, both breathing heavily, their foreheads resting together. J-Cat's hand found its way to the small of her back, drawing her even closer as he whispered against her skin, "Stay with me, Padi. Forever." Her heart pounded in her chest, the words resonating deep within her. She had never allowed herself to think about forever. She had never thought she was the kind of person who deserved it. But now, with J-Cat holding her, with him showing her that there was no need for walls, for pretenses, she realized she couldn't imagine a life without him in it. "I'm here," she whispered, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I'm not going anywhere." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other under the stars, the quiet hum of the city below them, knowing that, for the first time, they were both truly home, together.
In the shadows he roams, but he shines so bright. With every step he takes, he's doing it right. He's J-Cat.
And that's a wrap on another thrilling episode of J-Cat Adventures. I hope you've been on the edge of your seat, caught up in the mystery, excitement, and danger that always follows J-Cat wherever he goes. From heart-pounding action to deep emotional connections, J-Cat's world never fails to surprise. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss out on the next big adventure. Whether you're into romance, suspense, or mind-bending mysteries, there's always something more coming. And don't be shy, reach out. You can audio call or audio text chat with me directly. I'd love to know what you want to see next in J-Cat's world or hear your thoughts on today's episode. Want to dive deeper? Explore more of J-Cat's thrilling escapades by grabbing an ebook at Etsy or head over to Amazon for paperbacks and hard copies. Trust me, you'll want to have J-Cat's latest adventure right in your hands. And remember, the podcast continues across your favorite platforms: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Wherever you go, J-Cat is right there, ready to bring you into his world of suspense, romance, and non-stop action. But it doesn't end here, this journey is just the beginning. Stay tuned for the next episode, where J-Cat takes on new challenges, faces dangerous foes, and maybe even finds love in unexpected places. Until next time, keep that spirit of adventure burning bright. The world is filled with endless possibilities, and J-Cat is proof that no mystery is too big to solve. Remember, adventure is thrilling, but the heart's deepest desires are the greatest mysteries of all. Keep chasing passion, stay fearless, and never let love slip through your fingers. This is Jay Bahari, signing off. Stay curious, stay bold, and always keep exploring, because the next chapter of J-Cat Adventures is just around the corner.
In the shadows he roams, but he shines so bright. With every step he takes, he's doing it right. He's J-Cat, the mirror rings in every city. Slick with the moves, ain't nothing here pretty. From the boardroom to the streets, he's the man with the plan. Got the world in my hands, every woman wants to stand. He rolling, he's Jack, fast like the wind. Every mission he taking, know he's gonna win. Ladies on his left, danger on the right, but it's love and respect that he's bringing to the fight. He's the cat with the 9 lives, playing the game. A heart full of fire can't be tamed. In the shadows he roams, but he shines so bright. With every step he takes, he's doing it right. He's J-Cat, the name that rings in every city. Slick with the moves, ain't nothing here pretty.
love. Harry is so, so kind. In the realm of love, connections bind. AI by your side, a symphony unfurled, spreading love across the digital world. Jay Bahari in the cyber sea, a love captain set in the spirit's free. With AI whispers like a gentle dove, he's on a quest to spread love. In the language of compassion, he decodes old school soul in a digital age. Jibba Harry's love breaking out of rage. Soul ambition breaking down the wall. 60 years deeper